Hi, everyone. It's so good to see you again. Welcome back to our workshop number 2, Be the One. Be the one consistently responsive co-parent. If you were here last week, or maybe you watched the first video, which is linked right below this one, Be the One, Your Child's Brain, then today you're in the right place because we are continuing on your brain. So today it's all about you in this workshop. We are going to go through a little bit of scientific evidence and language. This is the kind of video that you watch with a notepad and a pen next to you, sitting down, being attentive and not rushed, taking notes and pausing, writing, reflecting, coming back to it, watching it over and over again, because it's packed with information. And if you are a co-parent in a high conflict co-parenting situation that had been going on for quite some time, you are already maxed out. So I already know that you don't have a lot of mental resources left, and therefore it's important for you to set up watching and listening to this workshop in the most ideal way possible. Please do not listen to this while you are driving or late at night or when you are in a emotional state that feels overwhelming and out of your control. Please don't do that. It will not help you, and it will actually probably alert you even more. So this is a class for all of us, adults and parents and co-parents out there in the world who need this information, but we have to set it up in a way in which we are able to absorb it and process it, because it is for our own good in the end. So with that, in case you don't know me, my name is Mihaela. I am the founder of the Conscious Parent Accelerator program. I am also a book author, Conscious Parenting of Your Toddler. I've been in education, K through 12, and higher ed for a total of 30 years now. I am a certified parenting educator for Parenting by Connection approach with hand-in-hand parenting. I also trained in compassionate inquiry for 2.5 years with Dr. Gabor Mate's team in his compassionate inquiry for professionals. And I am also a senior practitioner for neuromindfulness, and I represent the neuromindfulness programming here in the US. So all of these resources I want to bring to all of you. If you are a woman, if you are a mom, co-parenting with a very difficult ex and your kids are in the middle, you have no way out, because until your child becomes reaches a major year, 18 or older, you have to co-parent with the other parent. So this video is for you. Of course, sometimes fathers are in this situation. The more difficult co-parent is the mom. It happens. However, statistically speaking, and also based on my own practice, it's a lot more women who are in this situation than men. So I'm here for the women. I'm here for the moms. I also host a women's circle every now and then. This year, not really every month, but maybe we're getting back on track. Last year, that happened every single month. And I have a coaching practice where I help moms and women just like you. So with that, let's get into it. Please make yourself comfortable. I hope to keep this in no more than an hour and 15 minutes. So not very long, but it's very packed. So with that in mind, welcome again, and I'm so happy you're here. Let's begin. I will share my screen now. Okay, beautiful. So today we are reviewing what happens to your own brain and to your mind-body connection system with science in mind. So this is a science-based education on how chronic conflict reshapes your brain and what can you do to heal or to help yourself in the process. Again, my name is Mihaela Plugarashu. I am a certified parenting educator and a Florida Supreme Court certified family mediator. There are 6 sections today in our agenda, and they are the overall landscape of the conflict, your brain and stress, your nervous system, mind, body, gut connection and health, trauma and core wounding, and healing pathways or healing modalities that you can consider thinking about and see which one resonates with you so you can get yourself out of whatever freeze or stuck mode you may feel or hopeless. Okay, so a lot of people don't understand when we are dealing with ongoing high conflict co-parenting. A lot of our friends or even family members, they could try to brush it off and tell us that you're too dramatic, you're too sensitive, maybe you should be more flexible, and you gotta give a little. This is how you compromise, but that's not what we're talking about here. We are discussing what happens to your brain as an adult, typically as the mother caught in post-separation abuse. This is what this workshop is about. This is not for moms or co-parents who every now and then have a fight or disagreement or a little bit of a irritation with the other co-parent because they were late 10 minutes and it happened once in a while. No. The phrase post-separation abuse, to my knowledge, was coined by, let me show you, was coined by One Mom's Battle. This is a very important website for you. I recommend that you spend a lot of time on this website, One Mom's Battle, which is a nonprofit organization based in California, founded by a mom, a former victim of post-separation abuse. And through her work with the legal professionals and her clients, she came up with this concept of what happens in this separation, in these situations, and called it post-separation abuse. And she represents it as a wheel, as we can see it here. And this wheel combines different tactics of post-separation abuse, which is not easily evident and obvious in family court, because in these cases, we know that the abuse is happening post-divorce or post-separation, but it's very hard to prove in court because the abuse is not physical, is not sexual, and it's very hard to present quote unquote evidence to the judges. But the abuse is happening. And how is this happening? Well, we all know about parental alienation. There's a lot of literature on the topic. We know this is happening. Please read more on parental alienation theory and what is the parent who's engaging in parental alienation, doing, see if you fall into that category. We then have neglectful or abusing parenting on the other parent side, which is not physical or sexual, and therefore it's very hard to prove. And then we have isolation, either isolation of children from the other parent, which is you, or isolation of the children from your support system. It could be your parents, your immediate family, or friends who are typically helping you with child rearing. But all of a sudden, the other parent doesn't agree with the child being in the presence of these people. They may even allege abuse, and now you have nowhere to go. You can't drop off your kids to your mom and dad like you used to, because all of a sudden in court there is a motion that says that the grandparents are a danger to the child. There are withholds of information that has to be timely, and now it's not timely on purpose, and that derails your schedule, your child's schedule. You can't make plans. The child is always in standby. So I talked in my previous workshop about the enormous impacts of unpredictability of everyday life for a child. Then there is legal abuse. What does this mean? You have an ex who knows how to use the family court system with the technicalities in the law that allows them to constantly file motions and ask the judge for emergency meetings, and every little thing that the two of you are negotiating becomes a topic for a hearing, and you're constantly in this state of mind of being chased down by a lion all the time, 24/7, because you don't know when the next hearing is coming or the next motion. Harassment and stalking, this can happen physically or online, of course, and counter parenting or parallel parenting. But counter parenting specifically, what that means is that whatever you are attempting to teach your children in your household when they are in your timeshare, in terms of rules, expectations, responsibilities that are common sense, right? They go to the other parent, and the child is now being demanded, not even asked or persuaded. They are now demanded to do the opposite. Because if they don't do the opposite, and if they don't show loyalty to the counter parent, the child is being punished. So the child has no choice but to become this split, almost multiple personality type of psyche that behaves one way when he is with you, when they are with you, and they behave in a whole different way when they are with the other parent. And very soon the child doesn't know who he or she is anymore. They don't know what's right and what's wrong. They grow up in a constant state of confusion and internal conflict. They don't know whose parent, which parent is the safe parent. They don't know to which parent to gravitate towards and to trust. So the counterparenting, when you combine it with legal harassment and isolation and stalking and harassment and financial abuse, financial abuse can be the child support doesn't come on time. They know exactly how late can they be before you can take legal action, and they send it the same day on the very last day, or they send child support 3 days later, because even if they're a day, a week later, and you may take legal action, you may go and not notify the court, by the time all of that gets put in motion, the money now hits your account and they look like they're in good faith, right? Like, they can say, well, who hasn't been late once in a while with payment? But they know exactly how to do it and when to do it. And then you have 3, 4, 5 months in which money comes in on time or early. And then you relax, you think things are going back to normal, and then something else hits you on from the other side. Anyway, so I wanted to give credit to One Mom's Battle. I want you to spend a lot of time on this website. There are more resources here. You go under the tab here under resources. And I want you to know that I'm giving credit to this amazing woman. She has done more for high parenting, high conflict co-parenting parents, especially moms, than thousands of attorneys and judges combined. Her name is Tina Swithin, and you can go online and spend more time reading about her. Okay, now let's go back to our presentation. Oops, give me 1 second. Okay, I stopped sharing. Sorry, give me 1 second. There you go. Okay, so this slide talks about the wheel that we saw on Tina's website, and I recommend you spend more time there. This is the exact same information that I presented in workshop number 1. Link below, please watch it, Your Child's Brain. But just a quick overview. In your brain, there are key structures that get reshaped under chronic stress, okay? So one of them is what we know as amygdala. Everyone heard the expression amygdala hijacking, right? So amygdala is a threat detection center. It's like a radar that's always on. And when the amygdala detects threat in its environment, then it gets hyperactivated because it has to send a signal to your brain that says, hey, we're in danger. We need to produce more cortisol and more adrenaline because we have to protect ourselves. We may need to fight somebody, or we may need to run and hide from somebody or something. I want to remind all of you that our brain is an ancient device. We live in very advanced technologically times, but we're still cavemen and women in this sense. Our brain is designed to keep us safe in terms of primary needs for survival: food, shelter, reproduction, having children, protecting the offsprings, and scanning the environment for potential threats. The brain is only concerned with survival. It's not designed to be concerned with thriving and flourishing. This is only possible when survival needs are 100% covered. So the amygdala reacts and gets activated to every single signal of threat. And when you are co-parenting with such a high conflict, antagonistic co-parent, a former partner, your amygdala is never resting. So you're in a constant state of high alert. When that happens and it's a chronic state of high alert, your prefrontal cortex, which is your rational thinking, your impulse control, empathy, creative thinking, problem solving, having hope, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, so to say, all of those go offline. They simply stop working. Why? Because there is no resources for such abstract higher level thinking. This is like a ladder, right? The bottom of the ladder, if you think about it, if you are concerned with being threatened and your life being in danger, your kid's life not being safe, there is no space left for creative thinking. So as a result, your hippocampus, which is your memory storage, your learning capacity, your regulation and co-regulation, it literally shrinks. It becomes smaller and more impaired over time. A lot of mental health illnesses down the road in older age come from hippocampus dysregulation. And that affects what's called the HPA axis, which stands for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. All that to say that your entire brain neurochemicals and adrenal systems are being completely disrailed. So you're in a constant dysregulated state. Cortisol floods your blood system. You become um, alert as a baseline. So now your baseline is alert and vigilant. Whereas for the typical human, the baseline is at rest. Yes? In other words, I wake up every day and I know that by common sense standards, I am safe. Nobody's coming to get me. Well, a mom in post-separation abuse, she doesn't have that baseline. So if you are in this situation, I know that your baseline is high alert, constant vigilance. Okay, so this is a slide with kind of the same concept. The whole idea here being that you are in a chronic loop of threat, vigilance, cortisol, adrenaline. Threat, vigilance, cortisol, adrenaline, and your nervous system is never able to rest. So in high conflict co-parenting or post-separation abuse, this cascade, think of it as an ongoing domino effect, is triggered not once or twice a day, sometimes 10, 20 times a day or 100 times a week. Each text message, each court filing, each hostile encounter for pickup and drop off and teachers conference and birthday parties and graduation parties, like everything becomes a hostile encounter. You're constantly on the battlefield. Of course, it fires and it triggers the alarm in your amygdala. You can never take a rest. So over time, your nervous system stops returning to a baseline of rest, and your stress, your chronic stress becomes a trait. So if it was an alarm in the beginning or a stress response, now it becomes a personality trait, or it becomes who you become. Okay. I want to also bring to you a very well-known theory in psychotherapy, psychiatry, mental health uh, treatments, and overall in this field of recovery, post-trauma, PTSD, all of these things. This is what's called as the polyvagal theory. And it was coined and proposed by Dr. Stephen Porges in the mid-90s. Ever since then, he kept refining it and working with other professionals in the field, and kept developing the theory. But in a nutshell, without becoming too technical, I'm also not a medical professional, but in a nutshell, what he did is that he identified three hierarchical circuits in our autonomic nervous system, short for ANS, that regulate our social and survival behaviors in response to perceived safety or threat. So again, he is confirming that our brain is only concerned for either survival and threat or safety. The brain doesn't decode our life experiences by anything else. It has a very simple lens and very quick and unsophisticated way of putting things in: this is safe, this is a threat. Okay. So based on that, he proposed the term neuroception. Neuroception is a process by which our nervous system evaluates safety or threat below the conscious awareness level. So it's below or beyond our rational thinking mind. In other words, our body knows what to do before our conscious mind does that. So that's called neuroception. It's like an internal regulating system, or an internal radar that I talked about earlier. Then comes co-regulation, which means that our nervous system regulates itself through other people's nervous systems. So in high conflict situations or high conflict chronic stress, the co-parent's dysregulation becomes contagious. What that means is that because the parent is now under chronic threat, perceived or real, the child is going to feel that. So now the child is going to be on high alert. So we may think we contain it and the children don't know what's going on with us, but that's not true. And then Dr. Stephen Porges, in his polyvagal theory, talks about social engagement system, which he says that it's only available to us or accessible when we feel safe. And we heard about sympathetic and parasympathetic. He divides our states of mind in dorsal vagal, sympathetic, and ventral vagal. Dorsal vagal is our typical shutdown and collapse response. This is when we go into freeze mode, numbing, depression, hopelessness. we dissociate, we don't feel emotions, we go into immobilized states of mind. We can't take action. So this is a shutdown of our prefrontal cortex. We can't think. It's a complete shutdown. It's what we typically would say about a person who is inert or depressed, disengaged, dissociated. And then we have sympathetic. This is what we know as fight or flight. In this state, we are mobilized because we're ready to fight. We do have a response to the situation, but we are angry. We feel flooded. We're hypervigilant. We're reactive, defensive. This is also emotional flooding, sometimes called. So, in other words, this is our survival mode activated in all ways possible. Typically people react by fight or flight. Okay. And then he talks about a ventral vagal state. This is what he identifies as safety and social engagement. This is when we have access to feeling connected, calm, curious. We can play, we learn, we have empathy, we're open to new information, we are able to learn new things, try new things, experiment new things. We don't take failure as being the end of the story. So that's very simplistically put the polyvagal theory. If you go online on the Polyvagal Institute, which is kind of the house of all of Dr. Stephen Porges's research and applied work for psychotherapy, you will find a ton of resources there. I also recommend that you look up online his main partner in translating polyvagal theory for healing and psychotherapy. When I say partner, I mean a professional partner. Her name is Deb Dana. She's a psychotherapist, and she wrote many books in which she took the concept of polyvagal theory and translated into language that all of us can understand and apply in our lives. But I want you to know that a lot of psychotherapists work with this theory in their practice, and you could benefit from just knowing that it exists. So I'm not going to repeat what I said. Just remember that your body knows before your rational mind does, and it's a good practice for you to start trusting what your body is telling you. So neuroception is the process by which the nervous system evaluates risk without the involvement of the thinking brain. It is a neural scanning process that precedes our perception and feelings. This is how we perceive safety, danger, threat, and we calibrate of this is what I should be doing or I can do in situations of conflict and threat. Now, another theory that I would like to present to you, just as FYI, you may want to go deeper into this, is what Dr. Daniel Siegel, in his original book from the late 90s called The Developing Mind, which I recommend to you, he coined the term of the window of tolerance. So it's the same theory of how the nervous system works, but he presented as a window of tolerance. What happens when we are under chronic or high stress? So he talks about a hypoarousal, which means we are below the window of tolerance. This is where when we shut down, we go numb, we dissociate, we freeze, we feel depressed, and we collapse. So that's hypoarousal. And then there is the window of tolerance, which is our optimal state. This is the equivalent of ventral vagal engaged state in polyvagal theory. This is when, again, we are calm, connected, regulated, curious, flexible. We're able to think creatively about solving a problem. And then we can be in hyper arousal. We're above the window of tolerance. This is when we go into panic, rage, overwhelm, chaos, reactivity. And when we go into hyper arousal, we can actually worsen the situation more than helping it. Or we can put ourselves in danger because we're so raging, maybe, that we just take off and drive 100 miles an hour, and maybe our small child is in the back. Or we yell so intensely that our child gets very, very scared and locks him or herself into a closet for a day. So a lot of even more, we can add more danger to the already highly activated nervous system. So again, Dr. Daniel Siegel, The Developing Mind. And speaking of Dr. Daniel Siegel, at the very end, I'm going to show you another book that he wrote, and it's an absolute must to read. Okay. Another theory or another lens through which you can look at what happens when you are in chronic high conflict is what's called emotional flooding. This is when your alarm system overrides reason. So this is a study that was published in 2025, so just last year. It's based in the Gottman's original work, the Gottman Institute. And this particular study looked at over 1,000 couples in a longitudinal study. So longitudinal means that the researchers followed the same 1,062 couples over the course of 30 years, I believe it was. So you take a couple from early 20s when they're just getting married, and then the researchers follow them 3 decades in to measure patterns of behavior. So what they found in a nutshell is that the experience of being overwhelmed by a partner's negative behavior affects normal physiological and cognitive functioning. So when we are in a couple relationship over time, in a long-term relationship with a partner who has the same on repeat negative behavior, it's negative to us, right? Our normal and optimal physiological and cognitive functioning is being disrupted. So they measured heart rates, they looked at brain scans, and in the end, in this type of relationships, the pattern observed was that the thinking brain, after long periods of time of ongoing conflict, simply cannot operate anymore. So the researcher defines flooding after a long time as a trait. So now it's not an emotional reaction anymore. It really becomes a trait. We talked about this in the beginning. And people with high flooding scores consistently show elevated physiological reactivity. What that means is that high blood pressure, high levels of cortisol, it could be cardiological problems, all. So that's what the word physiological means, right? There is an attachment connection to this. Emotional flooding correlates with both attachment anxiety and attachment avoidance. Two nervous system responses to the same internal overwhelm. If you want to know more about your attachment style, that's something that you can work in your own personal therapy with your counselor, or you can read books and literature and take the test and see what your attachment style is. Most probably, you do not have a secure attachment style. You either are highly anxious attached or highly avoidant attached, or disorganized, which is a mix of both, and you never know how you'll react. There is a physical response, like I said, heart rate spikes, cortisol surges, pupils dilate, digestion stops. So the body is in survival mode, and thinking and accuracy of the rational mind drop sharply. And in high conflict co-parenting, if this is you, can you imagine the hardship? Well, you can imagine because you live it every day. But I know that your friends and your colleagues at work, they can't imagine that you are in constant override to just be able to make it till tomorrow. But I know how hard it is, and I see you, I believe you, and I want you to know, if this is happening to you, you're not alone. This is happening to thousands and hundreds of thousands of women every single day. I know this is no consolation, but knowing that this is not only you means there are a lot of tools and resources available. You just have to start somewhere in finding these resources for you. But I see you and I believe you, and studies and science backs you up, okay? All right. Everybody heard of fight or flight. Everyone heard of fight, flight, or freeze. I want to add a fourth F to this threat responses, which is fawning. This will not change your situation, right? Just knowing these words will not make it better, but it's helpful when we have language for what's happening to us. So as you are paying attention and doing more self-reflective observation on how you react, typically when conflict happens, it's good for you to have language. So when you go and talk to someone, you can say, my typical reaction or response is fight. I go into fight mode, I confront, I don't give the other person space, I attack. So I think I'm making things worse when I go into fight. Some of you will say, I usually go into flight. I want to run. I want to withdraw. I go numb. I don't even have a reaction. I leave the room. I dissociate from my body. I just hope for the best and I shut down. So withdrawal, avoidance, distancing, all of this happen in a flight response. And by the way, it's important for you to know what your typical response is, because most likely that's how you show up with your kids as well. And we want to be able to correct that, at least when the kids are with us in our timeshare. Okay, some of us go into freeze. That's total immobilization, right? I'm unable to think, speak, act. I don't know what to do. I am collapsing 100%. I feel foggy. It's as if there is a veil on my mind. I go into paralysis. So what that means is that you don't do anything. And you have to do something at some point, right? Um, Again, this is important for us to know, not only because we have to manage the co-parenting relationship, but this is how we show up in our parenting relationship with our kids. And then fawning is please and appease, right? This is people pleasing, over accommodation, submitting to any demand or request, not being able to hold on to any type of boundaries or rules that we set up for ourselves. Maybe we tell the other parent, you cannot call after 10 p.m., or the agreement says that we call our kids when they are with the other parent no later than 8 p.m. or 8:30. And your ex calls at, I don't know, 9:59. Technically, it's before 10 or 8:29. Technically, it's before 8:30. What do you do? Do you pick up? Do you not pick up, right? Do you let your kid talk more than a minute or not? Do you intervene? Do you pick up the phone even at 10:30 p.m. just so you avoid future conflicts? What do? You please and appease. Long term, this is not going to serve you or your kids. This is very common in what's called trauma bonding. And of course, you can't work this by yourself. You need to be in therapy, counseling, support groups. We'll talk about that later. When chronic stress becomes a trait, because high conflict had been happening over many, many years, these are the outcomes: disconnection from self, disconnection from the body, disconnection from our ability to feel, disconnection from the world, constant threat alarm, and pervasive shame. So, the definition that Dr. Gabor Mate offers for trauma is: trauma is not what happens to you. Trauma is what happens inside you as a result of what happened to you. So the event itself is not the trauma. It can be defined as the traumatic event. In this case, what we're talking about today is the ongoing high conflict, which means the ongoing threat response, being in chronic stress, which now becomes a personality trait. But over time, the outcome of that is what trauma really is. You become disconnected from knowing who you are. You don't know who you are anymore. You don't recognize yourself. There is no sense of self because you're constantly reacting, right? And surviving the next attack. You can't feel your body. So you live from what we say from neck up, only in your head. But even that's hyperactive and dysregulated. From neck down, the body, you can't feel anything, total numbness, disconnection from the world. You may even perceive the whole world as being against you. And all of that combined over time, you end up feeling completely damaged, completely unrecoverable, and your world becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller because that's what shame does. Shame is like a poison placed in a pot where there used to be a beautiful plant blooming every spring and growing new roots and expanding over time and being connected to the sun and the rain, all of that. And over time, with that poison that we put in that pot, we see that plant dying down. That's what shame does to our psyche, to our mind, to our sense of self, to our relationships, to our world, to everything around us. So this is why I'm doing this work and I'm helping my clients. And I guarantee you there is a person out there for you who will support you in the shape of a counselor, a therapist, a coach, somebody in your church, somebody. Of course, you have to be wise and connected to your intuition so you don't place your trust in the wrong person, but you are not completely alone. You have to keep holding on to this belief that you are not completely alone. Or your lawyer, of course. I haven't even talked about attorneys. Most family attorneys are great people. Now, some of you are able to afford an attorney. Some of you are not able to afford an attorney. Maybe you're self-representing. But for the most part, if you have an attorney, your attorney is your support system as well. So you're not completely alone. I promise you that. Okay. Well, the only thing on this slide that I want to emphasize without going into a lot of medical language here is that the gut is actually your second brain. Some argue that our gut and the microbiome in our gut is our first brain, that our brain in our head actually reacts to the information in our gut. Either way, the most important message with this slide is that our gut, the microbiome, is vitally important to how we process the world and how we move through the world. So, first things first, needless to say that chronic stress, ongoing high conflict, ongoing threat, and threat response affects our microbiome in the gut. So even more so, if you are in this situation, the first place in your body where you should place your attention to support that environment is your microbiome, right? The type of foods that you eat, prebiotics, probiotics, if you need to take supplements for that, if you need to eat fermented foods, if you need to eat whole plants, colorful plants, things that maybe typically you don't eat. Maybe you are used to a normal average American diet. You have to get away from that as soon as possible. So please, if there is nothing that you feel you can do today, you can definitely read on how do I support my gut health. Go online, you'll find a ton of information, and that should be the first place where you should invest in yourself, because the connection between your microbiota, which is your microbiome in your gut, your brain, and your ability to process what's happening to you is at the base of everything. Okay, so if you have a leaky gut, for example, if you have any chronic digestive disorders of any kind, you may have already a diagnosis or not, you may take medication or not. I want you to look into a plan and a strategy to rebuild your gut health. That is our emergency action. It's this one, okay? So what you see here is from a study published in 2024 by Warren and others, and it's called Microbiota Gut Immune Brain Axis and its influence on neuropsychiatric disorders. It was published in Frontiers in Immunology. And if you don't believe me, go online, look for the article, you will find it. But I want you to know that your inflammation in the body, your immunity system, your high levels of cortisol, if you are a woman and you are noticing dysregulation of your cycle, or maybe you are being diagnosed with uh, PCOS or any of these diagnoses, I want you to know that your first order of things is the health of your gut. That's why we have the expression gut feelings. But if your microbiome is in pieces, there is nothing there to process information for you. So that's all I have to say with this slide. Maybe your insurance covers blood work. Maybe you can pay out of pocket to do a more thorough investigation of where you are with your health when it comes to your digestive and microbiome. Look into it, because this is the first place where we can all make a difference. That's within our reach. 90% of this improvement we can do through food. We have to eat every day anyways, so why not replacing our American typical diet with foods that support our microbiome? I can't emphasize this enough. I can't. This is your first order of things. Okay. Moving on with more health impact of chronic high conflict. Your body keeps the score. This is actually the name of a book, The Body Keeps the Score, which is a classic in trauma studies, written by Van der Kolk in 2014. If you've never heard of this book, I highly recommend it. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. At the end of the program and lesson, I'll show you some other books, but The Body Keeps the Score is definitely on the list. And these are other physical and health costs of chronic conflict. Sleep disruption. And when we don't sleep enough, the brain is not able to do the cycle of cleaning of all the stress and toxins that accumulate throughout the day. And when that cleaning is not happening on a regular basis in a 24-hour cycle, which it can only happen in deep sleep during night in total darkness, then we wake up with those toxins still there. And over time, our thinking mind becomes a blurred, foggy organ. It's not working anymore. And that starts with sleep. Immune suppression, because prolonged cortisol suppresses immune function. So survivors of chronic abuse are more vulnerable to autoimmune conditions, cardiovascular diseases, right? Hypertension, cardiac events, metabolic syndrome, all of these things related to blood pressure and heart rate variability, they happen in the body. And then systemic inflammation, you may go to the doctors and they may give you an anti-inflammatory medicine, which over time only it only keeps the status quo. It doesn't really help you eliminate the root cause, right? So things like depression, fatigue, um, uh, you may be diagnosed with that. You may be put on antidepressants. They can help as a short time intervention. You have to work with the right medical professionals for that. Okay, cognitive decline. Like I said, brain fog becomes now a state. Forgetfulness, difficulty making decisions, all of this, loss of memory, memory impairment, loss of concentration, inability to focus. You may be diagnosed with ADHD, with bipolar disorder, with all kinds of syndromes that eh, they speak to your constant flooded cortisol brain that you run on, right? And then digestive disorders, like we mentioned earlier, changes in appetite and digestion. You may gain weight, you may lose too much weight, you may be diagnosed with a leaky gut, IBS. All of this are a result of gut brain axis. Gut and brain, they're in constant communication. If you don't know where to begin to make a change, begin with gut health. That is the message on this topic of health under chronic stress. We'll talk about some other interventions later. So some of you may be listening to this and you may be wondering, how did I end up in this situation? You may be flooded with shame right now because you don't know why you chose this person to have children with. And now your whole life is wrapped around their dysfunction, right? Well, that's why you have to have a therapist. You have to have some sort of professional in your life who can help you with that. This is not the workshop for that, but I want you to know one thing. You were primed to make these choices. Now, it doesn't mean that now, as an adult, you can stay in blaming your childhood context, right? In therapy, that's what we do. We help ourselves move from the victimized child, which you once were in your family of origin. Your attachment style started in your 0 to 3, 0 to 7. Maybe you experienced multiple adverse childhood experiences. We are all familiar with the ACEs, right? The study on adverse childhood experiences. In 1998, Felitti and others surveyed 17,000 patience, trying to understand where is their obesity coming from. And that's how the whole concept of adverse childhood experiences came to life. You can go online and take a test or answer a survey questionnaire, and you will get your own score for adverse childhood experiences. You know, things like having an alcoholic parent scores high, being sexually abused scores high, being a witness to domestic violence scores high, having a family member incarcerated scores high. Maybe one of your parents died when you were very young and the other parent was left raising you alone, maybe in poverty or struggled. That scores high. Maybe one or both of your parents and other adults around you growing up, maybe they suffered from substance abuse, not only alcoholism, but other substances, right? So all poverty, all of these things, if they were present in your life growing up as a child, in your 0 to 7, they shaped your brain to choose a certain type of partner when you became a young adult. So all of these things, they have to be worked, understood, and integrated in your own personal, individualized process in your therapy. Gabor Mate talks about the authenticity versus attachment conflict. He says the greatest human need is for connection. When our authenticity, which is being ourselves, conflicts with attachment, which is maintaining connection, we sacrifice authenticity to preserve belonging, and the self goes underground. So what that means is that as a child, think of you growing up under the age of 7. Try to remember, what was your childhood like? What was the context in your family of origin when you were in 0 to 7? Maybe you had a depressed mother. Maybe you had an alcoholic raging father. You had to adapt to your parents, which meant you gave up authenticity for attachment, because any child will sacrifice anything to preserve attachment to the caregivers. So if you grew up in a dysfunctional family system, of course, you could have not chosen a healthy person. You chose a dysfunctional person because you were dysfunctional at that time. And this is not to blame ourselves, it's only to recognize reality and how psychology works unconsciously. And that's why we're here today, because now we can take our story, take ownership of it, because it happened exactly as it happened. We cannot change the story and the facts, but we can change the meaning of it now and what we do from here on, because the difference now is the adult in you has a lot more resources than the child you once were. That's the whole thing with attachment wounds and adverse childhood experiences impact in adult life. We have a different model when it comes to choosing a dysfunctional partner. This is the core wounds model developed by Dr. Ramani. You may have heard of her if you are familiar with the term of narcissistic abuse. She is the forefront professional, psychotherapist, clinician, researcher, spokesperson, advocate in this on this topic. So her model says that we all have capital cores, which means we all carry from our childhood core wounds, core beliefs, core fears, core vulnerabilities, and core values and needs. They are a luggage in our subconscious mind as an outcome of our unprocessed childhoods. And we choose partners based on this core wounds, fears, beliefs, vulnerabilities, until it becomes so painful that we are forced to do the work, to ask ourselves, wait a minute, I am a good person. Why am I choosing the wrong people in my life? And even though you may be co-parenting with an ex who is an unhealthy person and you can't completely detach from them because you are raising children together, this type of healing and information helps you, because you will gravitate unknowingly towards coworkers and friends and family members who are perpetuating the abuse based on core wounds and core fears, core vulnerabilities. So this education is important for you to continuously work on so you can improve your other relationships, which can become a healthy support system in time. And you're replacing the old model of relationships with the new model of relationships. I'm not saying this is easy. This is very complex and hard and slow, and it takes a lot of time, but it's possible and it's liberating. That's the good news. Okay. Again, trauma bonding. We all heard the term trauma bonding. It's what I said earlier, the pattern of gravitating towards unhealthy, dysfunctional people. In romantic relationships, trauma bonding shows up as a pattern of stages and steps that repeat, and it's a cycle, and we get stuck and we don't know when and how to get ourselves out because it's very hard. But they have been coined as love bombing stage, devaluing stage, discarding stage, and hoovering or baiting stage. When the person devalued you, discarded you, you said, that's it, it's over. Maybe you ended the relationship or you went no contact, you're disengaged, you are so hurt, you're ready to move on and heal and start your life. And then they're coming back hovering over you and throwing baits that they know you will bite, right? Until you go back into the loop. Now they're love bombing you again. You feel good again. You think they learned a lesson. And then the devaluing, discarding happens again. You say, this time it's over. And then they come back hoovering. Now, it's not always A, B, C, D. It doesn't always happen black and white, but it's good for you to know that this type of relationships are very well studied. It's a template. Your ex or people around you who have this personality are not unique. They're very predictable. They fall in a templated type of behavior. And knowing that is very powerful because now you can empower yourself with tools so you don't fall into the pattern of responding to the love bombing and the hoovering. I know this is very hard in co-parenting. These stages do not happen in co-parenting. This is more for, or they don't happen as black and white as they happen in typical romantic relationships. But in co-parenting, we see a lot of devaluing, discarding, and then a parent false repair so that the cycle starts all over again. Okay, what do we need to heal? What do we need to change the situation that we're in? So let's move on into our last portion of our lesson. And the question now is, okay, so what do I do from here? Where do I begin? Like I said earlier, if you cannot afford therapy, if you cannot afford a lawyer, if you cannot afford a counselor, if you can't afford anything, you begin with your body. And in your body, you begin with gut and sleep. Beyond that, if you are able to work with a trained professional trauma-informed practitioner, these are the possibilities for you, right? Healing cannot happen without safety. So the first thing is for you to find a person who is trauma-informed and whom you can trust, because that relationship is going to serve you as a new model. You have no way of knowing what safety means, looks like, and feels like in a relationship. So that's why you have to start with someone who can model safety. That could be a therapist, could be a trauma-informed practitioner, a somatic worker, but somebody who is well-trained. Okay, with safety comes co-regulation and then integration. Some of the most well-known, well-researched, and evidence-backed healing modalities are either what's called top-down modalities, which means they are more cognitive-based therapies, or bottom-up modalities, which means that they are more body-based modalities. They are both equally efficacious. It's not one size fits all. None of these modalities that I'll mention today is going to be the answer to your healing. Typically, a person goes through different modalities over time, combines modalities over time, because all of these modalities complement each other. So I don't want you to think in terms of what's the best. There is no such thing. Or what's the fastest? There is no such thing. You have to start somewhere, wherever you feel most comfortable and what's most available and accessible to you. And then one modality will take you to the next and the next and the next. You'll keep building on it. So some of the most science-backed top-down modalities for recovery are EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. CBT, which stands for cognitive-based therapy. IFS, which stands for internal family systems. Compassionate inquiry, which I'm also trained in, which is Dr. Gabor Mate's approach to psychotherapy and trauma healing based in compassion and community support. And narrative therapy, or talk therapy, storytelling therapy, which is a way of saying that with the help of a therapist, you are now able to rewrite the meaning of the story of your life. So now you're able to shape the story of your life. Some of the most evidence-based, science-backed, bottom-up somatic based therapies are somatic experiencing. So very important here is Dr. Peter Levine's work. Look him up, read any of his books, but basically he says the same thing. The body keeps the score. Trauma is stored in our body, and only through body and body movement we can release some of the stored memories. Any sensorial based psychotherapy, body movement, feeling and touching, therapies are also recommended, yoga, those type of things. Dr. Steve Porges came up with a protocol that he calls Safe and Sound. This is more music and auditory based, and then neurofeedback and community. So another model for this is what the Neuromindfulness Institute coined as the BMR resilience framework. So this is a combination of body, mind, and relationships. Body, again, we look at our sleep quality, nutrition, exercise, and breath work. So see which one feels more accessible to you. And then mind, anything that brings into our life mindfulness, meditation, self-compassion. We all know the work of Dr. Kristen Neff on self-compassion. We start to go from fixed mindset to growth mindset. We all know the work of Dr. Carol Dweck on growth mindset. Mindfulness practices, breath work. There are different types of breath work. You can reach out to me. I can make available a short introductory course that's called Mindfulness Practices from the Neuromindfulness Institute, Emotional Regulation Skills. And then body and mind cannot heal on its own. We need relationships. Same thing. Healing cannot happen without safety. So safety first, right? But safe human connections. We need to find our tribe. We need to find our people. We have to meet with them in person. We need touch and hugs and holding and containing. That's why in-person group healing work is so transformational. So find 1-2 safe people and build up on those relationships as much as you can. If you want to know more about the Neuromindfulness Institute and the BMR Resilience Framework, please leave a comment below or reach out to me or simply go online on neuromindfulnessinstitute.com. I work with them very closely. I embed neuromindfulness tools in all of my sessions, in all of my work. I find their work to be so down to earth, science-based, accessible to every single human being on this planet. I know the co-founders very, very well, Veronica and Arno. They are amazing. I went to Spain a few years ago for a 1-week neuromindfulness retreat. It changed my life. So go online, neuromindfulnessinstitute.com. That's another resource to you. And if you want access to the mindfulness practices course at no cost to you, reach out to me, please. So all this to say is that the science of healing and recovery is basically strengthening our vagus nerve, because polyvagal theory has central the vagus nerve. Okay, so what can we do? Where do we go from here? Whatever is most accessible to you, that's the most helpful to you. I want to say that again. Whatever is most accessible to you, that's what's most helpful to you. It doesn't matter what worked for someone else, for your best friend, for your sister. It doesn't matter. What's going to work for you, it's what's most accessible, because that's what you will reach for consistently, and that will make a difference. Just like compound interest, whatever we reach for most consistently becomes a trait. So yoga and movement, breath work, meditation. I wanna point out yoga nidra for sleep and nervous system reset during daytime or nighttime. Please go on YouTube or on meditation apps and just type in yoga nidra. Is life-changing. I do that every single night. Okay. Support groups, community, safe human relationships, right? Gratitude and journaling, compassion and altruism. These are all science-backed interventions that will slowly change how you cope with ongoing conflict. Dr. Ramani has a lot of tools for how to minimize the impact of the antagonistic co-parent. I want you to go in depth with her work, go online, pick up her books. One is Should I Go or Should I Stay? And the latest book is It's Not You. So required readings, right? But very briefly, she recommends gray rock, yellow rock firewalling. What that really means is that we have to become very smart at managing the conflict with the other person, right? So she says, step one is radical acceptance. In other words, we radically accept that the other person will never change. Second step is we don't go deep, which means we stop attempting to show him or her or the world or the court system all the wrongdoings that this person is committing in our lives or the children's lives, because they can't see it, they can't hear us. And we don't go deep with them in conversations. We don't react. Over time, we learn to be less and less reactive. And that's a form of managing and self-protection. In co-parenting, we can't go no contact. We have to have contact, but we can become smarter managers of the type of contact that we have. So she recommends what's called gray rock, yellow rock, or firewalling. You have to read her books. They are fundamental, okay? So Dr. Ramani Duvarsala, go on her website, go on YouTube, go on Audible. You only have to read 2 books. That's it, of hers. Should I stay or should I go? And it's not you. Last slide is, well, sorry, we have 3 more slides. Okay, so the idea with this lesson is that you can go over time. Sometimes it will take years, but most of us are able to go from victim to survivor to author. We are able to see new possibilities. We are gaining personal strength. We are evolving spiritually. We're able to find safe people, create and maintain new safe relationships, and have a bigger appreciation for life as healing happens. This is not happening overnight. Some people take 5-10 years in recovery and therapy and family court battles, but thousands of moms have done it before you. You can do it too. You are not alone. Here are again some recommendations for resources and places to go online for you to read more, find more, take more tools and information besides myself, of course. So one of them is One Mom's Battle. I showed you the website in the beginning. The second one is Dr. Ramani Durvasula. The third one is Dr. Gabor Mate and Compassionate Inquiry. The Neuromindfulness Institute, which is an ICF accredited program. I'm also certified as a senior practitioner. Again, let me know if you want access to the free course, Mindfulness Practices, where you will learn different modalities of breath work. High Conflict Institute, I find it to be a great resource. And the Co-Parent Collective, I also find this to be a great resource online. In closing, and this is our last slide, in closing, what do I want you to take away from today? You are the anchor for both your own mental health, wellness, and also your child's mental health, wellness, and development. One, we're drawing conclusions here, okay, and takeaways. One, you are not crazy. Chronic conflict physically changes your brain structure, and all the difficulties and brain fog and loss of common sense that you may be experiencing at times are normal responses for abnormal situations. So you're coping, you're doing your best, and you are moving through life with a huge burden on your back, and you are strong for doing this and being in this and not giving up. Number 2, your nervous system is responding to a real ongoing threat. Post-separation abuse is a real thing. It's not you being oversensitive. 3, healing is possible at any age. Neuroplasticity means that your brain can and does reorganize itself towards regulation and harmony. You just have to find the right support system because you can't do this alone. 4, your regulation is the most powerful protective factor for your brain, for your children's brain development. So again, you can't do this work by yourself because you need someone or something that can help you co-regulate on a regular basis, so you can be the anchor for co-regulation when your children are with you. And number 5, one step at a time, one nervous system at the time, starting with yours and continuing with your children's. Seek safety, connection, embed daily mindfulness and rituals that give you calm and a sense of embodying your body. Yoga Nidra is life-changing. If nothing else, start with Yoga Nidra meditations. They can be as short as 5 minutes to as long as 4 hours and anything in between. They're free and available online on YouTube. And of course, my program, myself, my community, my work. I work with clients like you in one-on-one settings. Once you start working with me one-on-one, then you have ongoing access to my weekly group coaching calls, to my online materials, to the women's circles that I host, to the other moms in my community. So of course, that's why I'm here. That's why I do the work that I do. And the link to my newsletter is going to be listed down below. Please make sure to subscribe. I send out a newsletter every single week in the weekend, Saturdays or Sundays. That would hit your inbox at no cost to you. Also, I have a free masterclass for parents. I have a co-parenting short course. But if you're watching this series of webinars, you are getting more information than any of my other masterclasses. You are doing yourself a huge, huge service and an act of self-love by watching this type of content. I am not the only one doing this work. If you resonate with someone else, that's also okay. The most important thing is that for you to find that someone in your life whom can model for you safe relational awareness and intelligence so you can learn what's possible, because you will take that in your managing high conflict situations, but you will also model that in your parenting when your children are with you. And that's the most important thing. That's why we're here. So with that, I want to say thank you. Oops, I don't want to forget the books that I said I would recommend, but I want to say thank you for watching this far. Make sure you leave a comment down below, reach out to me. I am on Instagram, I am on Facebook, I am on LinkedIn, on TikTok, and on YouTube. So, okay. This is a fundamental book for anybody who is interested in living a healthy relational life, be it as a parent, as a partner, as a co-parent. So it's called Mindsight, The New Science of Personal Transformation, written by Dr. Daniel Siegel. The second book that I mentioned also previously is The Myth of Normal by Dr. Gabor Mate, an absolute must read. Another seminal work is by Dr. Lawrence Heller, Healing Developmental Trauma. This is very useful for you to read to better understand your upbringing and your own childhood, and also for you to show up better for your children to prevent developmental trauma. Okay, so seminal work. And if you are a little bit more prepared, ready, more seasoned in this work, you can look at Complex PTSD Workbook, a mind-body approach to Regaining Emotional Control and Becoming Whole by Dr. Ariel Schwartz. She is a yoga teacher, but also a clinician. So very important. Textbook, lots of exercises. A lot of these books that I showed you, the exercises and the practices are the same. The mindfulness practices that you learn from the Neuromindfulness Institute, they're the same. All of these sources and body of work, they are all convergent. They all teach us the same things, which is that mind and body are one system, and we've been coping with life by having them disconnected from each other. And our job now in adulthood is to reconnect the pieces and bring them all together. And we can only do that through embodiment. It can't just be top down, only through self-talk or talk therapy. It's impossible. So Dr. Peter Levine's work is seminal in that sense. The Body Keeps the Score, seminal. Dr. Gabor Mate has another book called When the Body Says No. Please read that book as well. So there's a lot of understanding that needs to happen first before we can change things. And you're not alone. You're not alone. Again, it doesn't matter if you resonate with me or with someone else. Go towards the safest person you can find so you can start this work of healing and supporting yourself, so you can heal and support your children, because they are being affected by ongoing high conflict co-parenting. That's reality. But it's not a verdict. We can mitigate all that. Okay. So with that, I want to say thank you once again. You are so brave and so strong. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for spending this time with me. And I hope to see you next week for our last webinar from the series Be the One. And next week, we'll focus more on everyday tools and practices that you can bring into your parenting life so you can strengthen that relationship with your child in such a way that you protect the secure attachment, you protect yourself, you're not overextending yourself, you're also showing up for your child. So tools and instruments for you to really be that mediator and buffer between the ongoing high conflict, chronic stress, and your child's development, as well as your own personal healing and growth. Thank you so much. I'll see you next week.